Hi, I'm Louise, and I'm kicking off our new Sunday School series. This series will be a couple weeks long, and we'll be talking about justice and injustice. And our focus is really going to be on injustice and what does Christ have to say about how we should react to injustice within the world. We're going to start with a verse from the Bible in Matthew chapter 25, verses 41 through 46. And to set things up, Jesus is talking about how he is going to separate people into those who are righteous and unrighteous. We don't hear those terms that much. We do hear the term self-righteous, which means when we create this image in ourselves that we have the ability to judge others. Jesus definitely doesn't encourage self-righteousness. But when he's talking about righteous and unrighteous, he's talking about the way that people are having a relationship with him, but also how they're acting on earth. So in his story, he talks first about those who are righteous would be like sheep, and the sheep would be the ones who are saved by him because when he was hungry, he says, they fed him. When he was thirsty, they gave him water. And they go on to say, what are you talking about? We never saw you be hungry. We never saw you be thirsty. We never gave you food or water. And he says, yes, but those who are the least of humans, those who are struggling the most, when they were hungry, you fed them. When they were thirsty, you gave them water. And that is how I feel you treat me. So the same is true for those who, when they saw injustice in the world, didn't react. And that's our verse for today. So I'm going to read from Matthew 25, verses 41 through 46. And it says, then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, for you are cursed into an eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me. They will also answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? He will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not for me. Then he will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. So Jesus is saying, if you look out into my people, into my world, and you are not able to see injustice, you're not able to see the hungry or the weak or the imprisoned, and you aren't able to care for them, then he feels like you're not caring for him. And what we might wonder, we've experienced injustice, all of us in many different ways, some in really extreme ways. Some of you may be experiencing injustice now. And if you are, we hope that you feel like church is a safe place for you to interact with your friends and for adults and tell them about the injustice that you're experiencing so that they can be a support system for you. But we may also think we just wish someone would do something. Someone would act like a superhero to combat injustice. And what I think this passage is telling us is there is no superhero. The people who are supposed to see injustice and to act are us. And that's what Jesus modeled when he was here on earth. And that's what he hopes that we'll do as we continue to be his followers here on earth. You don't have to battle injustice to have a relationship with Christ. But if you become a follower of Christ and you're trying to mirror his example, then it's something that you are definitely going to be wanting to do and that you're going to be hopefully starting to do. So this whole series is going to talk about steps towards acting against injustice in our world. And there are so many different kinds of injustice. There's global injustice, like big areas of the world who face food insecurity. There's local injustice that you may have seen in your neighborhood or at your school. And then there's injustice on the personal level. So there could be an injustice within a family situation. As we get older, we see these injustices more and more, and we wonder what to do. So the first step is to see it, notice it. And the way to do that is to just start paying attention to possibly people who aren't living the same lives as you. So maybe talking to somebody a little more in class that you don't know so you can learn about their life. Volunteer somewhere. Sit by someone different at lunch. or really listen to your friends if they're trying to tell you something that feels a little bit uncomfortable. The next thing to do is to be curious enough to listen. So the quickest way to see injustice is to listen to the people who are experiencing it. When someone tells you they're experiencing injustice, just listen and listen to learn. So try to imagine yourself in their shoes. Think about what they're saying. It's going to make you uncomfortable if you do that, especially if it's a kind of injustice that you've never experienced or the kind that you didn't even realize you participated in until you hear a story. But this is when conversations get real. And even though we may have this innate feeling that we should try to escape from that, this is when also progress can be made. So listening to someone else's story of injustice is important. The third thing that you can do is be courageous enough to name it. So if something's wrong, say it's wrong. If it's unfair, call it that. And when you see injustice around you or even in you, because certainly we all have it in us too, being courageous enough to call out what you see is important. And identifying injustice takes away some of its power because we can't change what people aren't seeing or acknowledging what we're talking about. So these are 3 steps that you can start with to face injustice. The most important one, the one to really think about probably this week, is seeing it, paying attention. And then after that, listening to people's stories, seeking them out, because all people in the world have very different experiences and all people face injustice in different ways. So being a person that hears their story is a way that you can be following Jesus and modeling what he shared in his life on earth, and then what he really is instructing us to do in Matthew chapter 25, verses 41 through 47. Interacting with injustice can be really hard because it makes us uncomfortable. It makes us uncomfortable to know people are suffering. It makes us uncomfortable to talk about suffering or think about how we might contribute to suffering. But those are all normal human feelings. And everyone feels that when they start thinking about and talking about injustice. Just because you see it, just because you don't know what to do to change it, doesn't mean that you need to feel guilty or bad about it. What you need to think about is, what is happening? How can I better understand it? And then in coming weeks, we'll be talking about, how can I address it? How can I help be the person who is being Christ-like and moving away from just sitting back idly with injustice around, and instead moving towards seeking out and working with people facing injustice and helping them move forward in combating those injustices. And that's what we see in the Bible, in the face of Jesus. We don't see an example that tells us to be self-righteous and judging, instead to be righteous, which means noticing people who are in need and caring for them. So I hope you'll join us next Sunday for our next interaction on injustice. And I challenge you this week as you go into the world to just pay attention and see what you notice.